So now we get to the question of what are intelligence, creativity. We've seen, the information we gather, how we gather information, problems with our gathering of information, and now we're looking at intelligence and creativity. So think of intelligence, we're going to define that because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding surrounding it. And we're going to define it through different theories, but on the whole, intelligence often looks at not what you know, but how you manipulate what you know. And so when we look at Cattell's theory of intelligence, Cattell had this idea in 1963 that we had crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. So crystallized intelligence, think of something solid, okay? It's firm. So think of that as your acquired knowledge and skills and random facts. So let's say it's definitions you learned in class, right, in psychology class. That's your crystallized intelligence. Well, your fluid intelligence is your ability to see complex relationships and solve problems. So if I give you a scenario on an exam, utilizing those definitions, but asking you to apply them in a sense, that would be an example of fluid intelligence. You're able to work what you know to problem solve. And a lot of these intelligence theories are going to revolve around that, have some component of maintaining your information and how you apply that information. And sometimes it's broken down into different parts, like Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence. We look at analytical intelligence, practical intelligence, so that's your street smarts, and creative intelligence, so how imaginative and innovative you are. So maybe you're not exactly the most academically oriented person, but maybe you have a lot of practical intelligence and creative intelligence. So intelligence can span different domains, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint one type of intelligence for everyone because there's so many different factors that go into it. But remember that the triarchic theory of intelligence for Sternberg has three parts. So we're looking at the practical, analytical, and creative. And so there's a little bit more of the definitions there, but I'm not going to read that to you because y'all can read. But Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. Now, Gardner basically was like, hey, you know what, those are good intelligence theories, but I think we can make them more specific. Gardner believed that we had all these different types of intelligence, including linguistic, mathematic, musical, bodily, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic intelligence. And those different intelligence types had characteristics. And I like this chart because it shows you a representative career for someone who is high in a particular intelligence, right? Because we all have different strengths. Not to sound all kumbaya or participation trophy-ish, but we all do have different strengths and different areas in which we excel. And so those different types of intelligence, kind of like Gardner was just trying to find a way to incorporate those different areas. Try to be more all-encompassing outside of these general analytical, creative, practical that Sternberg proposed, or Cattell's crystallized fluid proposition. But I think these are just kind of fun to look at. For example, intrapersonal versus interpersonal. Interpersonal is between people. So if you're good at understanding people and being empathetic, you would probably make a great counselor, social worker, or even a salesperson. I know it seems funny to see those on the same line, but salespeople do a lot of persuasion methods and a lot of connecting with people to understand their needs. And so, for example, those are great representative careers if you're good with people. If you're good at understanding your own emotions, intrapersonal is within yourself. So some people are very good at understanding and talking through their own emotions, whereas some people are not and maybe act out outwardly about them without any understanding of them. This is a good component for personal success over time, is the ability to understand your emotions and kind of have that grasp of yourself. I just recommend it for everyone, as does Gardner. And Spearman and Thurstone, I just threw these in. Spearman suggested that the behaviors considered intelligent have common underlying G factors and S factors. So G is just broad reasoning and problem-solving abilities, so general. Think of G as general, and S factor is specific. So S factor represents specific capacities. So let's say you are really good with musical type arenas. That's a general kind of factor. Well, the S factor would be specific capacities within that musical arena. So maybe you're good at reading notes. Maybe you're good at sight reading. Maybe you're good at making poetry and lyrics for the music. That's an example of Spearman. Whereas Thurstone kind of believed in those primary, mental abilities. So it kind of, again, Thurstone was trying to get at bringing us more specific types of intelligence, and as far as my understanding is, don't quote me on this, we don't have an established, like, this is the best intelligence theory, because there is still so much research occurring on determining what's valuable in intelligence. Like, how should we measure this? What is valuable in our society? So, which types of intelligence are important and worth measuring? It's a very difficult question, but I think it's just kind of fun to propose to you all to look at. Now, creativity. What is creativity to you? A lot of people think art. That's why I put this image here. But creativity is the ability to generate, create, or discover new ideas, solutions, and possibilities. I often tell people I'm not very artistic, but I'm really creative because I'm good at, I call myself MacGyvering things and finding solutions. It's a vital form of intelligence because it helps with new discoveries. You always hear the keywords of innovation in different fields that you're in. That's part of creativity. Taking your current information and kind of expanding that to see what possibilities there are. Some of the things associated with this are divergent thinking. So that allows you to arrive at unique, multiple solutions to a given problem. This is what's associated with thinking outside the box, because you're starting from one point and you're diverging to separate points. That's the best way I can describe it. Whereas convergent thinking, you're able to provide a correct or well-established answer or a solution to a problem. So think of when you converge into a point, you're merging, you're ending up at one end point. That's the difference. And then I think this is the last section with measures of intelligence. And the main thing that I want you to know is that IQ scores are standardized. Okay? And an IQ test was first created, I think it was in France, and it was to help determine where children's abilities were to help them perform better in schools. Well, now it was kind of misused at times, but what they're trying to do is standardize the individual scores to see where they fall in comparison with their peers. So generally, all people within the norm will fall between 85 and 115. That's the mean IQ score. And one quick note. Most data that you'll find concerning the average, this is called a bell curve. And what the bell curve is if you're trying to find an average score of something, the highest score is always going to be in the middle. Because if you're trying to find the mean, or the average of all scores, it should be that a majority of people fall within the mean or the middle. Because that's just how it works when you're finding general trends. I don't know how to explain it better than that. But you will find some people who are very low in IQ scores or very high. They are going to be the exceptions. They are going to be outliers. On a normal, every day-to-day basis, most people will fall within a norm. And it's our job in research to find that norm. So it's going to vary based on what you're looking at. Maybe you're going to find make a chart like this for height. It's going to be the same curve, but the values are going to be different. Because again, you're trying to find the middle, where the most of the people are going to fall. That's norming. And so these different intelligence scores, the most important thing to get out of this is that the way they're calculated is they're going to do the mental age divided by the chronological age. Okay, so your mental age is what you score divided by the chronological age or your physical age, and that's going to equal your score on a test. Times 100, of course. And that is where a lot of people kind of were trying to develop research to better address the needs of different students. And that's kind of the benefit of them in a sense. But the tests previously were asked in a way that weren't very inclusive. And so I'm just going to skip this part because I discussed that already, just on a separate slide. But there were cultural biases in these tests. So, for example, if I asked you, okay, where I'm from in Chicago, the only people who had boats, I live in Washington now, but the only people who had boats were really, really rich people. Okay, and I feel like that's most of the country, besides like this waterfront type community. But most of the time, the only people who have boats outside of being on the water are very, very rich. So if I asked a question on a test that said, if I want to ask this question in Chicago, steering wheel is to truck as helm is to blank. And I want to have the student answer that question. Well, that question has a cultural bias because only students who have had the experience with being on a boat would be able to answer it. And so that was the testing controversy surrounding IQ tests. And I think it's just important to note that, again, we're consistently trying to measure these different concepts in psychology and trying to operationalize them, trying to define them. But at the same time, there's a lot of progress that needs to be made. There were culture-free tests developed, but unfortunately, middle-class children were still outperforming lower-class children, so that may signify something needed there. And as well as they were not as good with predictive validity. So we weren't able to predict academic success as well as in the one with the cultural biases. So again, it needs revision. Mental retardation and language. So this is just a quick note, I guess, for my preachiness about our use of language. These are the scores from which, with IQ testing, they determine if someone has a mental retardation. Remember, to retard means to slow. We do not call someone by that actual word. It's improper use of it, as well as offensive. So, just a quick note about that. And also, I just want to leave you with this question, talking about the effects of how language affects how we think. Do you think changing the title of the Department of Mental Retardation to the Department of Developmental Disabilities has any impact on how people regard those with developmental disabilities? So, in our chapter, it talks about this in a little excerpt. Do you think changing those titles of things can help change how we think about those people? Because the word from which mental retardation, the offensive word that has been used in the past, unfortunately, as to demean certain groups of people, can have negative connotations. And with those negative thoughts and experiences we have with that word, it can affect even how we interact with people who have been deemed having a developmental disability. And so what I'm getting at is, do you think changing the titles of these things can change how we think about those groups of people? And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Why or why not? If you want to talk about this more with me, feel free. I'd love to. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a great week.